Hello, and welcome to another session of Excel Programming for Clinicians with me, Dolores Callum. In this session, we will take a look at how to work with text files. Now, this is a really useful skill for importing and exporting clinical data, either as text files or as CSV files. Specifically, we will look at how to open a text file, grab the data that's in it, and input that data into Excel. Then, we will look at how to open a brand new text file, output our data from Excel into that text file. And finally, we will take a look at how to open an existing text file, grab data from Excel, append it to the end of that text file, and then save the text file. Okay, let's start by opening a text file and inputting the contents of that text file into an Excel worksheet. Let's take a look at the text file we want to open. Here I have a simple CSV file which has two headings, diagnosis code and diagnosis, and a list of diagnoses. So 01 is renal failure, 02 is acute lymphoblastic leukemia, 03 is acute myeloid leukemia, and so on and so forth, up to number 70, neuroblastoma. So I want to programmatically open the content of this file and copy it to an Excel worksheet. Let's take a look at how to do that. First thing we want to do is declare a variable to hold our file name. I'll declare that as a string, and then I'll use the application object's getOpenFileName method. So selected file is equal to application.getOpenFileName. As before, this gets us the file name. To open the file, I'll use the Excel open method, and I'll pass in the file name, and then I'll tell it why I'm opening this file. So I'm opening it for input, and I have to give it a name, and that name has to be a number. So the open method needs to be told what the file name is, why you're opening it, in this case it's for input, as, and then you have to give it a number. And as you open various files, the first one will be number 1, and then the next one number 2, number 3, and so on and so forth. So it's always a number. Now let's use the worksheets object, and let's add a new worksheet. With a new worksheet added, that's now the active sheet. So let's give it a name. So now we want to iterate through the file, copy each line, and paste it into a row in Excel. So to do that, let's declare a variable to use as our counter. Let's set that variable equal to 1. So we always started at 1. And let's use a do until loop. So we want to do until, but until what? Well, we want to loop until we get to the end of the text file. So we want to get to the end of file. There is an Excel function called end of file. You just pass that in and then you say what file it is. And in our case, it's file number 1. And we close our loop. So we're using a do until loop. We're looping until that condition becomes true. The condition being we're at the end of the file. So now we want to copy each line as we loop through. So let's declare a variable for each line. The way you copy each line from your open file is to use the line method, and you want to input each line from your file called file number 1, and you want to input that into the next line. So this copies a line from your file number 1 into your next line variable. Having copied it into a next line variable, we can then copy that into Excel. Let's use a range object. Start at range A, and we'll concatenate on our counter variable I. So in the first loop, we'll be at A1, in the second loop, we'll be at A2, and so on. So we want to make the value property of that range object equal to the next line. And always, we remember to increment our counter variable by 1. So we loop through our file till we get to the end of the file. We copy each line in turn, and we put it into each row in Excel in turn. Finally, we close file number 1. Okay, let's run that code and see what we get. The application object getOpenFileName method has given us a file dialog box. I want to open my diagnosis file, and that is copied into a new sheet in Excel called Diagnosis. Okay, now so this code did exactly what we wanted, but there is one problem with it, and that is that we are hard coding the file name that we want to use, number 1. Now, if you're opening and closing lots and lots of files, there's always a risk that you might overwrite one of your existing files with a new file if you don't use the next number. So how can we improve on this? Let's declare a variable to hold the next free file number. Excel has a function called freeFile, which automatically looks for the next free file number and assigns it to a variable. So that way, we don't need to remember if we're on file number 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Excel will automatically find the next free file and assign it to a variable for us. That way, we can replace all instances of our file number with our free file variable. Okay, let's run that again and see what we get. First, I'll delete the tab that we had, and then I'll run that again. And it works as before. But this time, we're using free file rather than hard coding the file number. Next, let's take a look at how we output from Excel to a blank text file. In my file directory, I have a blank file called Diagnosis. I want to copy the entries I've just made in my Diagnosis tab to that blank text file. Let's see how to do that. Let's declare a variable for our file name. I'm going to set that file name equal to the application object's default file path, and I'll concatenate on the name of my file. So what is the default file name? Well, if you go to Excel, File, Options, Save, your default file for your particular version of Excel will be specified under default file location. So in my case, my default file location is in my OneDrive documents folder. We are going to need a file number to hold our next free file. And then we're ready to open the file. We use our open file, we'll pass in the file name, and this time we are opening for output. And we say for file number. So we're using the open method, we're passing in our file name, which we've got from the default file path and the name of our text file. We've also set up our next free file number. So once we open our file for output, we can say as free file number. With that, let's make sure our diagnosis worksheet is active. And let's select cell A1. We've seen this code before. We pass into our range objects the current active cell and the end active cell, and then we call select. And that gives us a selection. We can then for each through that selection. To do that, let's declare another variable for each cell in that selection, and we'll declare that as a range. We can then say for each cell in the selection, we can write that out to our text file and then go to the next cell. Okay, so we want to write out each line in Excel to our text file. So let's declare a variable for our next line. As we look through the cells, let's set that next line equal to the value property of our cell. Remember, cell is a range and ranges have value properties. So we capture the value into our next line, and the way we write that out to a text file is we use the write method. We are writing out to our file number, free file number, and then what are we writing? We are writing the next line. So we're calling the write method, we're telling it which file we're writing to, and we're saying what we're writing. With all of that done, let's close our free file. And let's alert the user that their file has been saved. Okay, let's run that and see what we get. Says file saved. Let's open the file and take a look. And the file is saved with all the information. Next, let's take a look at how we open the file and append some data to it. What we want to do is open the same file, which currently ends with number 70, neuroblastoma, and we want to add some new diagnoses at the end. Let's see how to do that. Let's declare a variable for our file name. And let's declare a variable for our file number. Let's set our file number to the next free file. And for our file name, let's use the application object. getOpenFileName method. That gives us the name of the file we want to append data to. Then we call the open method and pass in our file name. But this time, we are opening for append. So same as before, we're calling the open method, we're passing in the file name, but this time we're opening it for append. And then we say as file number. And the way you write to an open file is you use the write method. You say which file you're writing to, and then you say what you're writing. I've written out 2 lines, and now I can close my free file. Let's use a message box to let our user know we've saved the file. Okay, Let's take a quick look at the file before we write to it. It currently ends in number 70, neuroblastoma, as we saw before. Let's run the program. It asks us which file we want to open. We tell it the file. It says it's written to file and saved it. Let's take a look. And sure enough, our 2 entries have been added. Okay, so we've just learned a powerful new technique for opening text files, copying their content to Excel, copying data from Excel back to a text file, whether that's a new text file or appending to an existing text file. I hope you found that interesting and useful, and I will see you in the next video.